Ron DeSantis from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses, and thank you all for your service, particularly military service. Secretary Kerry, you spoke about how the use of this gas breached the norms of civilized behavior, international norms, and that we need to enforce this norm, kind of like you would enforce lessons learned by children and bullies, I think that you had said. And I know you got a little irritated about the Benghazi issue, and it was not on your watch and you're not responsible. But as I look at this, that same line of reasoning should have applied to Benghazi. The assassination of a diplomat breaches norms that were recognized probably far longer than norms against use of sarin gas, and yet the U.S. has not acted to avenge the death of the 4 Americans, including our ambassador, who were massacred in Benghazi. And that lack of response, I think, using the same line of reasoning, certainly could embolden terror groups and Islamic malcontents that they can do this and that we may not respond forcefully. Now, you're not responsible for that, but there is a frustration among some of my constituents about how we've handled that on your watch. But I just wanted to clear up how some of us view that.
Well, Congressman, let me speak to it, because I appreciate completely. I think it's a little different from the earlier question, so to speak. I appreciate and respect completely the need for justice to be done. And believe me, we have this discussion in the State Department and in the White House about the steps that are being taken. And there are steps being taken. That is not a back burner issue. And in an appropriate setting, I'd be delighted to share with you exactly what is going on. But that accountability is a priority for the President's priority for us.
We appreciate that, and we are waiting for that. Secretary Kerry, do you think that striking Syria for Assad using poison gas will have an effect on whether Iran decides to continue with its nuclear program or abandon it?
I think whether or not the United States stands up at this moment, as I have described earlier, to enforce this almost century-old prohibition on the use of weapons will, in fact, affect not only Iran, but loads of people's thinking about whether the United States is good for its word.
So you think that it is possible that Iran, seeing a limited strike against Assad, that they will actually decide to abandon their
No,
weapons?
I didn't say that. I said it will affect their thinking about how serious the United States is. I can't predict what they're going to decide to do or whether they'll abandon it or not. But I'll tell you this, it will enter into their calculation about what we might or might not be prepared to do. And if we don't do anything, I absolutely guarantee you that, too, will enter into their calculation.
I guess my fear is that they've already made their determination and they're going to continue with it, but I guess we will find out. In terms of these opposition groups, and I think it's true that when you degrade Assad, you are benefiting opposition groups, and I think that the bulk of that energy right now is with Sunni supremacists and al-Qaeda-affiliated terrorists. But it is difficult to kind of figure out where everybody is in all this. And there was a quote that you had given about when we were evaluating the Libyan opposition. You said, we didn't know who all the people were in Eastern Europe either. We don't always know who they all are. If you ask Lafayette the question, if he knew everyone over here when he helped us during the American Revolution, what he'd say, I think that you have to kind of have a sense of the course of history and what they're fighting for. Is that pretty much, do you stand by that quote and kind of the difficulty in evaluating? And I ask that because, you know, we've seen with the Arab Spring, we've seen the reaction to us going into Afghanistan, Iraq, and kind of what is the animating impulse in these Muslim countries. And there was a comment about we'd like to see a pro-Western government take the place of Assad, and I have not seen any evidence to suggest that that's what would be the primary impulse motivating the people in a post-Assad Syria. Indeed, I fear that what would motivate them would be the Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni Islamism, of course, al-Qaeda type terror groups. And so that's the sense of history that a lot of us see. And that's why when we're looking at a potential strike, how that could affect the civil war, we don't want to be doing something that's going to lead to an outcome that's as bad as having Assad or potentially even worse.
Congressman, a very good question. And the answer is there are some really bad actors in some of these groups in Syria. Al-Nusra is not the worst, but they're really bad. And there are a couple of other groups that, you know, some people characterize as worse. But one of the things that is concentrating the president's thinking about Syria and the reason for supporting the moderate opposition is to have a buttress against those folks who, if Syria continues to move in the direction it's been going, if there's an implosion, they will be strengthened. There will be more of them. This is, in fact, something that does bring Russia and the United States together. When I was in Russia and met with Putin, he discussed specifically their concerns about the extremists. But Syria, traditionally, historically, in the recent years, has been a secular country. And the vast majority of the opposition, 75%, 70% of it, is hopeful to have a very different Syria, free Syria, Syria that has minority rights protected, that is inclusive, and that's what the opposition has, in written form, committed themselves to and is talking about wherever they go in the world. So I hope you will recognize that the best way to isolate that extremist opposition is to more rapid, the extremist components of the Syrian fabric, is to more rapidly build up the opposition and diminish Assad's capacity to prolong this.
Joaquin Castro.